All right. So these Chinese balloons and more things that Biden's starting to blow out of the sky, what does it tell you about both China and the United States at the moment?
Well, what it tells me about China is that their levels of surveillance are way beyond anything any of us have understood. I mean, you know, we've had the debate about Huawei getting into 5G networks, and finally the Brits have said we won't do it. We know that even drones that you buy that are made in China. But the balloons, I have to say, I've been very surprised by this. You know, the last 3 that have been shot down. The Chinese fight back is to accuse the Americans of doing it, but hey, the Americans have got the most up-to-date satellites in the world. Why would they need spy balloons? And stories that maybe these balloons have been flying over 5 different continents. So, look, you know, most of our Western politicians do not have the guts. Many of the great and the good in our societies are already in the pay of the Chinese Communist Party, and be in no doubt about that. And they're a much bigger threat to us. And the more we learn, the bigger we realise that threat is. As for America, well, it took Biden days to shoot down the first one. But finally he did. Hopefully, this will start a much bigger debate in America about China. And remember, the man that woke us up to all of this was Donald Trump. It was Trump, going way back to 2016, who started talking about the threat from China in a way that I don't think, Paul, any of us had fully understood before. Or, as he put it, China.
When you talk about that infiltration of China, right, it ain't just the balloon, it ain't just the satellite, it's the attempts to hack, to get information. Like literally, the Chinese hacked the Australian Parliament a couple of years ago. They hacked and got the plans to our version of MI5, right? ASIO. But on top of that, because so many companies want to sell stuff or build stuff in China, and they end up having a disproportionate effect on the government than the citizens at any one time, our governments are in a position where they're saying one thing about national security and wanting to stand up to China, but they're presiding over economies that are totally exposed to China.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we've become in many ways dependent upon China, but it isn't just the influence of business on politicians that worries me. This is much deeper and more sinister. I mentioned Huawei, the communications firm, a moment ago. If you have a look at the UK non-executive directors of Huawei over the course of the last 10 years, what do you see? You see retired senior politicians, retired senior civil servants, and retired bosses of giant business conglomerates. And this goes right to the top of British society. And if it's happening here, you can bet your life it's happening in Australia, in America, and everywhere else. You know, money is a very, very effective tool to get people to dampen their criticism. So this is very sinister, it's very deep, and what we need to understand is that the Chinese are playing a 100-year game towards world domination. Wake up and smell the coffee, everybody.